All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the latest edition of Understanding the Edges. This is a series that is being put on by the Mayor's Commission on Homelessness and Affordable Housing, centered on breaking down the realities of homelessness and housing-related issues in our community. Again, this is focused twofold on educating service providers and the community at large about, again, the different complexities of these issues, recognizing that, again, often our understanding is not in sort of encompassing of the realities of people's experiences. And the more we sort of can educate ourselves about the stories of the work being done in the community, the better. And the other part is to sort of activate the general public, activate us even regardless of where we're coming from today, to take a more active role in contributing to these solutions. So focusing on a variety of topics. And today we're lucky to have with us Louise Pocock, who is an immigration policy attorney with South Carolina Appleseed Legal Justice Center, and Lydia Cotton, who is a community leader, also a member of the Mayor's Commission, who will be chatting with us about some of the unique challenges and resources available to our local Hispanic communities. So with that, I'll give it over to Pastor Rebecca from St. Matthew's Lutheran Church.
Hey, thanks, Chris. And thanks to Louise and Lydia for being with us today. And glad you could join us. So just real briefly, Louise, what does your role look like within the organization that you're in?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on this panel. And I think it's wonderful that Charleston is addressing this issue of homelessness and people facing, housing shortages and high expenses, and especially in the immigrant community. So I'm the immigration policy attorney with South Carolina Appleseed Legal Justice Center. We're a statewide nonprofit organization, and we do a lot of systemic advocacy on fighting for economic and social justice for low-income South Carolinians. And I focus on issues impacting low-income immigrant and non-English speaking residents in South Carolina. So yeah, I work with Lydia closely on a lot of things. I sort of see my role as a community lawyer, and my goal is to be responsive on a systemic level to issues facing the community. And obviously the lack of housing and some of the unique barriers facing immigrant and non-English speaking families are systemic, right? And they're only increasing during the pandemic and the economic uncertainty that we're seeing now.
Yeah. And Lydia, I see you all over the place. So what about briefly describe your role as well for those who are listening in and will be viewing later?
I'm just a servant of the community, and I just, the bridger, I need to make sure that I keep building bridges so everybody can connect at the end, community, government, statewide, organizations. So I just serve in the community, and I would like to people see themselves as like that, the community. If we all do that, one person at a time can help the city to communicate. I think that's what it takes, and it's wonderful. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. So very much advocating in many different realms for many different people. So I guess getting into the discussion right away. So Louise, you mentioned the barriers and challenges that are specific to those who are immigrants, to those who are low income, and also for those for whom English is not their first language. So what would you say are probably the leading issues that you deal with on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, so I mean, one of the biggest complaints that I hear from the service providers that I work with statewide and the families is there's just generally a lack of access to information about programs from local governments, from state agencies, and, obviously from charitable groups as well. Oftentimes there's just a lack of information and services in Spanish. And it can be really daunting when you're needing help. So, I mean, lack of language access is another one. A second one is sort of fear and misinformation. you know, over the past few years, there's been probably more changes in immigration policy than in the 10 combined before that. And a lot of pressure around public benefits and being very careful about what kind of assistance you receive as an immigrant, because it may compromise your options in the future for adjusting status and things like that. So I would say lack of access to information in a language people understand, culturally appropriate help, and then also there's a lot of, you know, misinformation that we have to fight, and helping people understand, you know, there are limitations, especially on federal programs and state programs. You know, I think people think that immigrants come here and take advantage of all these public benefits, but there's actually very strict limitations for public benefit programs for immigrants. So oftentimes you'll find a family where some members won't qualify, but other members might be US citizens, like a spouse or a child. So helping that family understand what benefits are available to them based on their immigration status in the family, and then helping them access them in a way that they understand. And then oftentimes another big issue is a lot of assistance programs, even charitable ones, require a lot of documentation, right? And oftentimes when you're talking about the immigrant and non-English speaking, this is a population that's not necessarily going to have a bank stub or a pay stub. You know, they may be working informally. They may not have a lease, right? Which is, you know, going to be very problematic if they're facing eviction or they're having issues with their landlord. So again, just sort of, you know, meeting people where they're at. We've had a lot of success with working with Lydia, trying to get SC Thrives, which is, you know, administered a large rental assisting housing program to adjust some of their documentation requirements and allow people to provide affidavits of income and things like that. So yeah, language access, fear and misinformation, and then just sort of bureaucracy, you know, the regular administrative bureaucratic barriers that everybody else faces trying to access these programs.
Right. To me, it sounds like there's this mix of the bureaucracy and wanting to get it right. And when the laws keep changing or the policies keep changing, it's hard to get it right. You combine that with misinformation and just, you know, plain fear, and then combine that with all of this being communicated in a language that someone may not be comfortable with or confident in. This doesn't look like a very empowering situation for someone who is really just trying to find some assistance and find some solutions. So how would you say you do work to try and combat that lack of empowerment for somebody?
So I think there's two levels, right? There's only so many Lydias, there's only so many me's, there's only so many of those sort of community brokers, right? So we are trying to build up an inventory of information and ways to access programs that are easier for immigrant and non-English speaking. And through that, you know, we do that through partnering with statewide organizations. So for example, we worked with the Commission on Minority Affairs and PASOS, which I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with PASOS. They're a wonderful, they're a community health worker model, basically. So they train community health workers to work with with Latinx families in South Carolina to improve health outcomes. And so they really focus on sort of the social determinants of health for a family. So early intervention services for children, so pairing families up with first steps and getting all those evaluations. They try and pair families up with, you know, public benefits to make sure the house has as much income support, and, you know, everybody who's eligible for health insurance or Medicaid is getting it. So they really provide full wraparound services, and they do it in Spanish, right? So through that partnership with the commission and with them, we've created a website called screcursos.com. And we can add that to the chat somehow, and I can send some more information to you guys. So the website is primarily in Spanish. There are a few banners in English, but the information is in Spanish. And for example, we provide contacts to PASOS if you are a Spanish speaker and you want to apply for WIC, right? Because that's a community broker that can help that family understand their eligibility. And because another issue is, like, immigrant eligibility is pretty complicated, especially for some of these government programs. Now, WIC is one that actually isn't, like, because the benefits for the child who's obviously born here, they're going to get it. But Having community brokers who understand these rules. So I do a lot of training on that and outreach so that they can help identify families and make sure that they're getting all the benefits that they're eligible for. And then we also work with the state to make sure that their policy manuals and their training are matching that. So it's sort of because of, you know, constant turnover in state social welfare agencies, it's sort of a bit of a hamster wheel thing. And, you know, there wasn't a lot of, one thing, you know, this pandemic has been horrible, but one thing I will say has been heartening for me is I've seen a lot more interest on the part of state agencies and state, you know, people in charge of policy in these programs on, you know, implementing better training around immigrant eligibility and also more language access resources. So, and a lot of what we hear from them is we're just not, you know, we didn't budget for that. It's not in, and as the state budget is going down. So it's really about making sure that those priorities are heard, right? So connecting people, actually on Thursday, the South Carolina Legislature's Joint Citizens and Legislative Committee on Children is meeting, right? And so this issue around language access and making sure that all eligible people have access to these programs, regardless of who's in their family and their immigration status and what language they speak. Those are issues that we hope through people like Lydia to bring to that committee's attention and make sure that the legislature is helping these agencies, because I think the will is there for the agencies. They just need more support and resources to serve this population better.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing is, big question is how do good intentioned agencies, even, you know, I'm in nonprofit in a church faith-based community. How do good intentioned agencies who would encounter those seeking immigration services or services in Spanish, how would, what can they do to be the most hospitable to those seeking services, and how can they be most helpful and cooperative in these efforts?
Well, I mean, I think, you know, what we've learned from you know, I'm part of a national language advocates group, and we meet and do trainings regularly. And one thing I've learned from working with them is that having a plan, and also you'll see this in a lot of the federal guidance around, and obviously a lot of nonprofits and organizations are not, but if you have a plan, right? Like, so what do we do if somebody who doesn't speak English come in, right? Because oftentimes it's some poor front desk person who has to deal with this person, and nobody's ever trained them, nobody's ever talked to them, nobody's ever said, here's what you do if somebody who doesn't speak English come in. So I think, you know, as a well-intentioned organization, you know, I know planning can be hard for nonprofits, especially service-based one, because it's just constantly go. But taking some time as the board or as the executive to sort of think about, okay, what are we going to do if a non-English speaking person comes in? And you may not, you know, you may not be able to resolve the issue right now because you don't have the resources or whatever. But as the conversation gets started, then you can work to sort of support your staff and supporting that population better. So I think coming up with a plan, this is not new. There are lots of organizations that do well. I encourage you to reach out to the South Carolina Domestic Violence Coalition, because again, they serve their nonprofit members to help make sure that they have adequate language access services for everyone who comes in for help. And that is in crisis emergency situations, right? So I think there are examples in their resources. And again, I'm happy to do the research, right? This is, if there are organizations that are like, hey, you know, can you help us partner up with somebody who's doing this well? That's a part of my job, right? Like, I really love, you know, one of the things I love working about with Lydia in Charleston is she's just, you know, organically created this amazing model of community engagement and building leadership and building bridges to government agencies. And so my goal is to take Lydia across the state and replicate that sort of community engagement everywhere. So I'm really, you know, if there are people interested in doing better, I'm really interested in partnering with them to help them find the resources to do that.
You know, Pastor Rebecca, one thing that you said earlier is that we try to make everything perfect, right? You mentioned something like that. And that is exactly what I feel that we need to stop doing. You are totally right. I was like blown away what you just said, because if we can stop trying to do it perfectly for the Hispanic community and just simple listen to the people, you know, from themselves, let the community itself speak. Stop talking for them. You know, we have great leaders in the grassroots community that, when I say leaders, they're unknown because they didn't have the opportunity. If they go and talk to somebody, we're like, wait a minute, you don't speak the language, so, you know, I cannot hear you. You know, that needs to stop in order for knowing. That's what Louise is doing. I call it Luisa, I apologize.
No,
that's
it's
what
fine.
Louise is doing, is make people listen to the mom and dads, listen to the people, get their advice, make them your advisors. Don't necessarily listen to Lydia, but listen to those families, and you're going to find out exactly how to work with that. But try to make it perfect. And I know that many organizations and government try so hard. And when I look at it, sometimes I'm like, you're so far away and even so close at the same time. Because all you have to do is sit down with the people.
Yeah, I think there, you know, I personally, like, I'm not going to be able to come up with a perfect solution off the bat. I can't do that on my own, but where I see Lydia fitting into the picture is, like you said, Lydia being the bridge builder. So I think, you know, in times where I've had to work with families who are trying to access resources and English is not their first language, reaching out to Lydia's been incredibly helpful. And, you know, just being aware that I'm not the perfect solution, but I can try and find people to help come up with a better solution. So it's just the trying for a better solution, I think, is even a good start, just from my limited experience with that as well. And so I would say, I don't think we can replicate Lydia, but we can certainly look for bridge builders and people who amplify voices.
So that team, that experience that you and me, Pastor Rebecca, has, it was a great experience. And that team, that's what everybody needs to do. Simple. The community needs to team up with the agency, with the organization, with the government, help them to be that bridge. So yeah, I do appreciate, you know, everything and the love that I receive, but I need to make sure my community be the bridge, like Carlos, Luis, you know them, you know them by the name, you with them every Wednesday night, or, you know, Patricia, those are the people, the Marisol Bailey, which she really, City of Charleston, doing an amazing job. And those are the people that we need to help to highlight and go for them, because they will not have the strength yet to do it, because they feel that they're not part of it. And it's because we need to open the doors wider for them to come in. It's not difficult.
Yeah, I would agree with Lydia. It just takes a little humility. I mean, I think having conversations like this in English, you know, are a great first start. But, you know, there's a lot of cultural activity right now in Charleston. And I think, you know, if the city wants to do some specific outreach, or the housing authority, you know, reach out to some of these community events that are going on and say, hey, we don't have anybody that speaks Spanish, but can you help us translate some information that we want to get out to the community? And just, you know, creating those partnerships. There's a real, you know, there is a real desire, and there are leaders in the community that, beyond Lydia, that can help build these bridges. And I think it just takes a little bit of creativity and reaching out. And like I say, I've been very encouraged at how many state agencies have reached out to me, have been a part of the statewide work group where we talk about these issues every week. So I think there's a lot of opportunity right now for people to be creative and create new partnerships.
But I want to make clear as well that I want to make this very clear to the Hispanic community, Latinos, X. The tools are there. The city is prepared. The organization have what it takes. You see, it's not lack of the tools that we need to get it done. It's the communication that has to change. Everything else is great. And one more thing, when somebody or a Latino Hispanic community do not qualify for something, say it. Say it. You know, not, well, let's see, or we know that you don't qualify. We need to say it. So those people learn how the system really works. And I think that lack of saying it because we have heartbroken or the system is right that way, oh, be careful, you know, say it because that helps so much for them to understand where they are.
So, I mean, this is a really, I think, powerful conversation because what you're both lifting up is there are people and community members out there who are working to raise their voices and wanting to raise their voices. And we're a bit deaf at a larger level. We need to clean out our ears a bit and really create space where people are partners and that there isn't a disparity that can be built by assumptions or lack of knowledge. What would you say are the leading assumptions, incorrect assumptions about the Hispanic community around in this area?
Well, I can't tell you some. I'm going to tell you one. That mom and dad that comes through the door of a building, city building, that you see her lost because don't know where to go or don't understand what the sign says. The misconception in the Hispanic community is that there's not intelligence there. There's not intention to do better and to learn. And that is the more damaging for any human, right? For any human to come in. When we're talking about language, it is more difficult. So that right there is the misconception. Those people are so intelligent. We proved that already. The model that we create, it proved that. I don't do anything in my community if I don't talk to them. They're my advisors. My advisors are not people right there, you know? They are my advisors. They are the one who tell me, Lydia, go right or go left. And the intelligence is so huge that you'll be surprised. So that has to be definitely my point.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, to flip it, I probably have the Spanish vocabulary of a toddler. So I can't imagine if, you know, woke up and it was totally flipped, you know, how little I would get by in day-to-day world. And yet I have an education. So what you're speaking to is really cracking that language barrier and bringing people to see the gifts that our neighbors have to offer. What are some other assumptions as well?
Louise.
I mean, I think there's sort of there can be a general assumption that people who come here as immigrants are just, you know, looking to take advantage of the system. And I think, you know, by and large, that's just not true. And I think one thing I'm really encouraged about is when you see situations like, for example, in Walhalla, they have a new Latinx city councilwoman, and she's the first Latinx city councilwoman out there. And she has helped, along with her partners and colleagues on the city council, create a task force for diversity inclusion. And I'm kind of getting off topic, but the point I want to say is that this misconception that people come here to take advantage or don't want to work hard or whatever is often easily erased when you set up situations where the immigrant or Spanish-speaking community can interact on a regular and sort of, you know, normal life basis with other people and have more avenues. And I just think, you know, for the majority of immigrants, like if you think about any time you've moved in your life and how stressful that is, and to think about some of these people have literally come on foot across multiple countries with their children, with their few belongings. They've managed to make it to South Carolina. They've managed to find work. They've managed to start their immigration process and file their, you know, claim for adjustment of status. They've managed to get their kids into school. They've managed to find a place to live. Like, these are incredibly accomplished individuals, you know, the immigrants who have made it to South Carolina, and every one of them has worked way too hard to get here to want to compromise in that in any way. And that's where a lot of the fear comes in, because they are not here to take advantage of government programs by and large. And, you know, when they are coming to the door of an organization or an agency, it is an absolute last resort, right? They don't want to be there. They don't want to be asking for this help. And it's desperate at that point. So I think, you know, just like everybody else, this misconception, like Lydia said, there's just great ingenuity, there's great intelligence. And I think, you know, on a policy and macro level, I'm a big fan of data-driven policies. And when you look at immigration, by and large, there just isn't an economic argument against it, right, in this country and in this state. Like the benefit we've seen from giving DACA recipients access to college and to work authorization has just been humongous, right? And to think that we would, you know, cut our nose off to spite our face in that situation and tell all these kids that they can't work anymore. Or, I mean, they're adults now, they have families, they're professionals because we've had the program. So I think that misconception is really unfortunate. I think it comes from outside South Carolina forces, because when I see, you know, for example, on the DACA issue, we work with a group of DACA recipients across the state who are pushing legislation to change. So right now, even though you have work authorization from the federal government as a DACA recipient in South Carolina, you can't get an occupational license from the state because the state has to pass a law saying that that's permissible. And the sponsor for that is actually a Republican, Representative Neil Collins. He sponsored legislation to give DACA because he recognized the inherent unfairness that these kids have gone to school here, they have families here, they have lives here, and now we're telling them that they can't be a teacher or a nurse or a doctor, or, you know what I mean? So what I'm saying is I think we need to create more opportunities where, you know, government agencies, where policymakers, where regular community members have the opportunity to interact and work with the immigrant community, because I think that really shatters those negative misconceptions, like Lydia said, and people understand the intelligence, the strength, and the, you know, the drive that the immigrant community has.
There's so many misconceptions we cannot go over. There too many. It's a long list. It's not short, the list. So, but these are some.
But you know, who would have thought that in Walhalla that they would have elected a Latinx city councilwoman, and she's popular and she's doing great things and she's changing. So, you know, not everybody has to get elected to office. You know, Lydia's created a lot of change there. There's the Hispanic Alliance in Greenville, which has done an amazing job of creating bridges between the community. And there's groups like Pasos, which do a great job. So I think there's a lot of momentum, and we're building infrastructure to better support the immigrant and Spanish-speaking community, but we need to keep going.
Or yeah, definitely, because with these assumptions, I mean, the danger of these assumptions, the dangers of these you know, stereotypes is writing that narrative over a person and not allowing space for a person to tell their own story. And if we aren't going to allow the conversation to be opened up, I mean, we're missing out on some incredible ingenuity and determination and incredible gifts. I mean, essentially our community is not complete at all if we are not opening up space for this conversation to happen in whatever language it needs to be in as well. So I guess looking ahead, what would you say if you have you know, an average citizen, an average person in the city, how would you encourage them to connect and learn more about this conversation and learn more about these advocacy efforts that are going on, or perhaps become a part of these advocacy efforts that are going on? Well,
I'm going to talk a little bit about that because I really have a hard time trying to explain, right? To the cities and to the people who wants to connect. Lydia helped me to understand, okay, this is how it is. Oh no, I'm going to do a different way. you know, what can I say? Mm-hmm. Everybody has their own way to do it because they want to say we did it, but it's a specific way to get to that community and call the attention. The community is not listening. It's not. That's the first thing. Because there's so much pressure for so many issues they can hear, okay? On top of that, we send the message in a way that is not effective. It's not because Lydia says so. Remember, my advisors are themselves. It's because they say so. Mm-hmm. So we have a long way to go. When we invite the Hispanic community to be part of something, we cannot invite them at the end or at the middle. Everything is done, and now you're talking about me, and that's how you want it. It's not working because the need is so different. The need is fear first, okay? Mm-hmm. The need is get rid of that fear that we have to work on. So I really urge you, any organization that really wants to talk to us, to help us listening first and make us part of it from the start. That is a big issue. So I see so many movement, I see so many help, and then they're being, with all due respect, waste, many of them. Mm-hmm. Because the community is not getting it for many reasons, and because they're not listening, it's not being done for them to listen. It's not just the Mexican hat or that they call the attention. It's not the fly about Hispanic stereotypes. It's not that. It's the pain there is there. It's the fear factor. It's the domino effect. That's what we need to go after. And mm-hmm. we don't have to go with so many things about Hispanic. We need to talk straight to the people, be honest with them, and tell the truth, you know, about what we do, because we're so intelligent, we're so family oriented that we're going to get it. We're going to love you more. And that's it. So that is one of the biggest headaches that I do have. It is let me give you an example, Latinx. When I tell the grassroots community Latinx, they say, who? I'm not Latinx. I'm from Honduras. Are you Hispanic? Yeah, we're Hispanic, but we're not Latinx. So, you know, you're Latino. No, I'm not Latino. I'm from Mexico. Oh, I'm a Latino. I'm from Puerto Rico, Caribbean. You know, it's 21 countries, they're totally different. You cannot treat them all in one bag and say they're this and that. And of course, we got to get through the Latinx thing eventually. We got to get through it because it's there already. And that's going to be the language. And I've been talking about it to the group. But they look at me like, what? Mm-hmm. No. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, even just how to refer to the community is kind of a loaded question, like Lydia is saying. You know, I have seen, obviously, the younger generation is, so Latinx is a term that is meant to be more inclusive because often Spanish is gendered. So you would have Latino or Latina. And I think, you know, with the sort of awareness around LGBTQ rights and identification and stuff, there's been a movement to refer to people as Latinx. But yeah, I just saw on Facebook yesterday, you know, there was a community announcement about some kind of resources. I can't remember exactly what it was in South Carolina. And somebody from the community was like furious that they had used the word Latinx. Like, this is, we didn't come up with this word. This does not, I don't identify with this. It's trying to, you know, take away our culture and our thing. So that can be a debate in itself. And again, I think the point is it really emphasizes having trusted community brokers, right, as an agency. And that's really important, right? Because this is a community, like Lydia said, that is very family oriented. It's very much based on word of mouth and who you know, and you're not going to trust information unless it comes from somebody who's already sort of in your circle and et cetera. So community brokers are really important. And I think for people statewide, there's on the South Carolina Commission on Minority Affairs, the Latin Affairs Division, the Hispanic Latino Division, on their webpage, they have a directory of businesses, churches, organizations serving the Hispanic and Spanish-speaking community in South Carolina. And so I think that that in itself is a really useful tool, because you can go on and look and see who's in your area. And if you're doing a community event, reach out to the grocery store, reach out to the church, reach out, because these are going to be where you identify established, trusted community leaders. These people already are interacting on a day-to-day basis. They understand the needs. They have the trust of the community. So I think that that's a really important step. And then going back to housing and eviction, and I think Lydia mentioned this, and I'm sorry, Pastor Rebecca, if you wanted to move on, but I do want to think that knowing your rights as a in the Hispanic and immigrant community is hugely important. And like Lydia said, stating your rights. So for example, in the housing context, a lot of housing applications are going to ask for a social security number. Mm-hmm. Technically, you don't have to give your social security number to apply for housing, right? And if a landlord refuses to accept an application without a social security number, that's could be a possible discrimination violation, right? And the fair housing laws apply to everybody, right? Private landlords, whether you have status, whether you don't, right? So there's certain things, and 90% of my job is working with people like Lydia to make sure the community understands this, or at least to know who to go to for help if they think something's wrong or something's not right, and stuff like that. So I think knowing your rights is really important. I think another thing for the Hispanic community is just making sure, you know, when it comes to housing, if you do get an eviction notice, making sure that you respond right away, making sure that you request language services right away and let the court know that you don't speak English. Stuff like that, just knowing your rights. And same with schools, right? So every school, every public school has a McKinney-Vento staff member, and that is the bill that is supposed to, that's the person who's supposed to help homeless families, right? Because there's special provisions for homeless families that they don't have to, you know, that they can be enrolled in school while they get together documents to prove residency and stuff like that. So I think, you know, a lot of help with agencies making sure that, you know, people know what their rights are, that rights are clearly described in English and in Spanish, and that we get that word out to the community and to the organizations serving the community, because we do need people to lift up those voices and say, hey, this isn't right. We're not meeting the need here. We need to do better.
Yeah. So Rebecca, quickly, please, let's continue with the Latinx, because we need to educate our community. So I just want to say that if I say one thing, I say the other. We need to keep talking Latinx. Mm-hmm. It's important. It's important because we have to something to learn ourselves, the grassroots.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and tapping into what Louise said, that lack of knowledge and lack of knowing rights and being empowered with that lack of knowledge I see that the danger is that it can create vulnerability, that families could be taken advantage of very easily in terms of housing and eviction. And how much does that ring true in your work?
Yeah. So I can tell you this. Do you know how proud the grassroots feel when they're next to a police officer? Mm-hmm. It's like, wow. Mm-hmm. It's pride, okay? So the lack of being closer, let's talk about the police. Because the police is the one that we find out it can really knock many things off. Once you are closer as a community with the police, it's a domino effect. I always say that because it's the truth. We've proven already, we've done it, we are doing it. Now with one city, City of Charleston and many others. So that right there it would be dangerous if we don't really keep finding a way, or the police department keeps supporting us, or the city keeps supporting us in that, because once you open that fear, it's about the fear of them. Mm-hmm. Honestly, everybody can say it's more fear for everything else, which is many things is true. But we find out the fear of the police is the one's going to help us. I'm talking about the grassroots. I'm not talking about the citizen Latino, you know, they can. Mm-hmm. I'm talking about the one, the fear, guess what? Is the majority. Mm-hmm. So regardless of my colleagues, my friends agree with me or not, We already proved, and they can say it now. I'm so proud to serve next to the police.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think what Lydia's talking about there is the domino effect. It might be hard to say, like, well, how does, you know, interacting with the police and the community make me feel better about my rights in other realms? But it does have a domino effect, right? Because that is the ultimate, like, law enforcement agency in the land, right? So if you feel like you have a path to communicate with them, if they understand the needs of your community, if you feel like you can go to them with issues, then yeah, you're a lot less likely to get taken advantage of at school or in your business or while trying to rent a house, right? If you don't feel like you can go to the police if somebody does something wrong to you, then of course you're way more vulnerable to be taken advantage of, right? So it's just kind of a no-brainer. And I do, you know, I understand that sometimes people criticize Lydia's approach with building those relationships with the police because there's been this very antagonistic, you know, because immigration enforcement has been so, you know, and the partnerships between local police and federal immigration enforcement have become, you know, more prevalent. But I think now is the time more than ever to create those relationships with the police, because even in Charleston County, which has a, you know, an agreement with ICE to detain illegal, you know, undocumented people in the state that they come in contact with, I think creating a relationship with the police department is, even with that kind of agreement in place, is going to quell the fear in the community, right? And make them more likely to access help, to feel supported and stuff like that. So I think, you know, those types of interactions are really important.
What kind of work is being done with police departments to help foster a more positive relationship? Is it basics in terms of language training? Is it the ability to speak with community leaders? What work is being done?
A lot of work is being done. Yeah, when it comes to that, we work the community. Well, in the city of North Charleston, we work once a month with them inside the community grassroots. Our Berkeley County Sheriff, we're doing that. We're in conversation with the city of Charleston Police Department. It's a lot of work being done, a lot, for the last 5-6 years.
Yeah. So I think, you know, just to elaborate a little bit on Lydia's example in Berkeley County, and correct me if I'm wrong here, you know, there was some crime against the Hispanics, you know, a couple of really violent, you know, robberies or something against the Hispanic community. And I think the Berkeley County Sheriff had some real issues investigating the crime in the community because they hadn't built up trust. They hadn't built up a relationship, right? So they were able to connect with Lydia and with Carlos. And it was really a simple, you know, and the police department's like, how do we do this? And Carlos says, well, we go in the evening when people are home, when they're making dinner, you go with me by your side and we knock on the door and we explain what the police department does. We give them your card. We tell them how to get the Spanish speaking officer. And so it's really just as simple as facilitating that basic conversation and explaining to people what the police do here. And you know, if that police officer showed up by himself on the door, I don't care if he did speak Spanish, it's not going to open, right? But because Carlos is there, because he's known in the community, because he's done the footwork. So, I mean, it's really just as simple as those basic communications. Like, I mean, these forums are great, these things are that, and I know in-person interaction is hard, but there's still ways to do it in a meaningful way. Another thing specific to housing, and in Charleston, you guys have the Charleston Housing Court, right? So how easy, you know, is it to get your language access there? How easy, if you're a Spanish speaker and you get a notice of eviction or a notice of, I forget the formal term for it. I don't do housing law, but I do know your rights stuff about housing law, and work on policy stuff. Our organization actually doesn't do any direct representation. I wanted to be clear about that. We really work on policy, education, outreach, know your rights stuff. But anyway, like, how easy is it at the courts? You know, they have a responsibility to provide a translator. All of the legal, you know, the notices are supposed to be so if you get a notice in English, how quickly is the court going to give you that notice in Spanish? You know what I mean? So those are the types of things at the local level there in Charleston that you can put pressure on. Does the court have a language access plan? Are all staff trained on that? You know, you guys have those relationships because you're part of the housing coalition. You have all of these people at the table let's have this discussion. How are you serving, you know? And so it's not just holding your own organization accountable, but it's bringing up the conversation and having it with your partner organizations, because that's going to undermine your success, right? Like, I only refer to organizations where I know somebody's going to speak Spanish, right? Like, because if I send a Spanish speaking family to an agency that isn't going to be able to help them, or if I send them somewhere where I don't have a contact, I say, you know, you have a right to Spanish. They're probably going to give you a hard time about it. You know what I mean? So I try and explain. And like Lydia says, just be very realistic with the family about what you're offering them. And I think we can, you know, as a nonprofit service community, we can push each other to do better, and we can push our government agencies to do better because they're your partners, you know?
When it talks to the city of Charleston, the police department, you have Marisol Bailey, which when we need something, we immediately call Captain Thompson, Dustin, and or even the chief. I mean, the doors are wide open for us to solve many issues, and we're grateful for that. And we get in places when it comes to the city of Charleston. It's being there for us. I mean, in a way, the police is, I just have to make a phone call and help us out. So I really want to appreciate that. But not only that, Jones Island is an area that it needs a lot of information. We're working towards the future work in that community. Obviously, it's not going to be leading by me, by Marisol Bailey, but that is the way that it should happen, just like Louisa says.
It all goes, the running theme that is running through all this is it all goes back to trust and honesty, building trust with the community, trusting that the Latinx community knows what they're talking about, and not assuming that we know better. That's a very foolish assumption if you really examine it, but trusting that people know what they talk about. And then honesty in where are we really in our ability to provide service, in our knowledge, where are we really? And having the honesty to say, we think we're here, but we really need to be taught, and we need to be taught by that community that we trust knows what they're talking about.
I'm going to be honest with you. I feel in a good place when it comes to this area, right? The Low Country, because the cities are listening. The top is listening to us. You know, when the top listen, all they have to do is talk to from the top bottom, say, hey, help me out with this. And when I find myself in the middle, if I go to ask for something in the city and I ask for somebody in the middle, it's like they don't know what I'm talking about. And they don't know about us, and they don't know the work that we do. And I think I'm feeling a good place because I'm getting the help. All we need now to complete that is that everybody from top to bottom know who is the people who's helping or wants to help to connect the dots in the Hispanic Latino community. But I feel very hopeful because I feel the support, the love, the understanding, but we need to get the people in the middle. You know, it's a chain of command, right? That chain of command needs to help us, because right now it's not, because it gets stuck, the information somehow. And like, who are you? What do you want? You know, I want to help, but if you don't know who I am or what I do or my team is doing or the grassroots is doing, how can I help you? So that chain of command information, it needs to help, you know, be better.
That sort of leads into what my next question was that I was thinking of, is just if we could transform this structure, just if we could cast that vision and transform the structure overnight into that vision of, you know, what would be the vision for a transformed structure for people to have the access they need to resources?
Everything that Luisa says, and not only that, honestly, it sounds like a joke, but it's true. And obviously walk the community. We need to walk the community. That's the only structure, just like she explained, the Carlos, you know, the Marisol, have a team, start with the police. We honestly, if we want the Latino listen, let's start with the police. walk the community with them every corner that we can, once a month if we have to. Let's talk in social media with them, and with that communication level is going to help, because then other programs can come in for training leaders, right? For helping them. Okay, you Carlos, let's get you trained. Let's show you everything that how the city works, and let's build leaders. But if it should be a training specifically from every level of the city or county to really educate the community. It's education. It's all about education. All about.
Flow of knowledge. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, ideally, you know, people could easily adjust, you know, I have a lot of sort of pie in the sky fixes, but I think, you know, again, going back to steps, realistic steps that organizations can take is, you know, how many people right now are coming into your organization that don't speak English or have an, you know, immigration status right now? Most organizations don't know that, right? That basic information. Most agencies don't know that. So that's a good place to start, is to start tracking, you know, along your demographics, how many people don't speak English come in seeking services. And then second is, like I said, make a plan and make it somebody's problem, right? Identify a staff person and say, this is who is responsible for serving non-English speaking or complicated, you know, just like you have somebody who's going to deal with a complicated case or whatever. Same thing, like identify somebody in your organization. And that's really important for agencies, right? Because, and to make that person's name on top of everything, to have them appear in Lydia's Facebook group and say, hey, are you having issues with such and such agency? I'm the person. Or, you know, especially like the major agencies like the courts, like does the court have a staff person identified to deal with these types of issues? So I think there are a lot of sort of organizational steps that people, and like I said, I don't expect everybody to have like, you know, 100% language access services available 24/7. It's an ongoing conversation. It's an ongoing goal. But if we're not talking about it, we're not going to be addressing it, right? So I think ideally every agency and organization should be having this conversation. And you know, there's data available. Like, look at how many people in your census tract are estimated to be LEP, you know, certain things like that. And if there's more information about who's in the community that maybe you're not serving that you need, that's information you can get, I can help with, you know. There's ways to sort of plan for this contingency. And then, yeah, once you're able to serve the community, then it's like Lydia said, it's going out and making those connections and finding out who the trusted brokers are and getting your information out there. And, you know, these relationships just pay dividends once you finally establish them. And it's really fruitful for both sides, I think. I know I really enjoy it.
Yeah, yeah. And just kind of looking ahead too, what are the things that are developing or coming up now that have you excited for what you do in your work?
Well, for me, it's the Latinx City Council, you know, Advisory Council, I'm sorry, at least for the city of Charleston. Working on that, and that get me excited. It's the first one in the history. That's huge for us. So I really appreciate that. And many other things, there's many plans, but then again, we have to put in action. You know, there's not hope, there's nothing that we can gain if we don't have action. If we don't put boots on the ground. And if we don't understand that we think different, we want to serve. Latinos wants to serve. They need to give the opportunity, that's all.
Yeah, I mean, so I came to this job a year ago. I was working in Charlotte before that, doing direct services and a lot of outreach with the immigrant community on public benefits issues and public charge up there. And I had a lot of Spanish speaking clients. So I'm relatively new to this job. And I would just say, you know, I think, you know, I kind of I was like, oh, South Carolina and immigration policy, this is going to be an uphill battle. But I would say I'm actually extremely hopeful. I have been so encouraged by the level of organization and work that I have encountered in the Latino community on, by people like Lydia and Carlos, and like I said, the Hispanic Alliance in Greenville. And so I think, a frustrating thing for me before the pandemic was trying to make that connection, right, between the agencies who needed to be, partnering with the grassroots community and understanding their needs. And in some ways, being virtual has made that connection easier for me, and it has been able to also the sort of replicating best practices. Like now Lydia is on a weekly call with me and other advocates across the state. So in that sense, I'm very hopeful about the infrastructure, the sort of civic engagement, the civic power that is being developed in the Hispanic and Latinx community and immigrant community in South Carolina. When it comes to housing, though, I'm really not hopeful about anything. There are a few protections out there right now. Again, you can go to escibrecursos.com for information in Spanish. For example, there's an eviction moratorium for certain people who've lost income, and you can figure out how you might qualify for that. It's like an affirmative thing. You have to submit a declaration to your landlord, etc. The point being is there's sort of a checkerboard right now of protections that might keep people in their homes, but don't do anything about the issue of non-payment of rent, right? And those protections are set to expire at the end of this year. And I think, the estimates that I've heard of the wave of evictions that we are going to see is crushing. And I was actually just part of Hispanic Alliance legal team. They had a presentation by SC Legal Aid about evictions to their sort of to their community, just as a sort of a general information. And one thing that they were saying is they used to advise people, save that last month's rent, just get evicted, you'll go find a new house. But we live in a modern age, and one thing, they can't advise that anymore, because most South Carolina landlords, if you have an eviction, if you have back rent owned, whatever, they are going to put that in a renter's database, and they're going to report that to all the credit things. So one eviction experience can cause years of homelessness and housing instability. So what I'm trying to get to is, I don't think the issues that we're going to be facing are something that the city of Charleston can fix. They're not going to be something that the state of South Carolina are going to fix. It's going to be something that we need to come together as communities. We need to push our state lawmakers, and we need to push our federal government, because ultimately this is a nationwide crisis, and we are going to have to deal with the gazillions of dollars of back rent that people are not going to be able to pay. And like I said, all of that is going to be reported. So it's not like people are just going to say, well, I'll find somewhere else to live in December. It's not going to happen, right? So I am not hopeful on housing. I think we need to have, beyond the sort of grassroots community, we need to have a very concerted effort as a nation to do something to address this, because it's going to affect our whole economy, and it's going to affect the well-being of families and children. I mean, as you guys know, an eviction event, homelessness is a hugely traumatic event for a family. So I think, I don't know if you all have any more ideas, because I think you have more expertise in housing policy than I do, but I'm very concerned, and I'm very, concerned that, already vulnerable populations like Spanish-speaking immigrant communities are going to be hardest hit.
Most certainly. And it is it's an issue that far more of us need to have a sense of urgency on, because it's going to affect far more of the community than we realize. And it's not just the people being evicted, but like you said, the impact that it's going to have on the economy. So there needs to be a greater sense of shared urgency about it. So yeah.
For example, the SC Thrives program, which was supposed to provide back rent for people to help prevent eviction, I think they were up and running in July, and they spent $5 million in 2 months. And I know a lot of people who didn't get help. They weren't able to, so that's just a small sample of the type of need that's out there right now just in South Carolina. And I don't know how we're going to meet that.
Right. Absolutely. At this point, I mean, thank you all. Thank you both for so much so much for what you've shared. And this has been eye-opening. I hope that this has been eye-opening for those who have been able to listen in, and for those who will be able to hear more, and encourage people to join the conversation, to figure out, find those ways to listen and tune in, and just learn, and be open to being taught as well. But at this point, I'll pass it over to Chris.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Yeah, that was really great. Some really wonderful information. One thing I just wanted to touch on, because we didn't get to it at the beginning of this, but can you just speak really briefly to what is like the Latinx population look like in the Low Country in Charleston County in terms of like number, just so people have an idea of what that population looks like in our area?
I was saying the state's like 450,000, but in the Low Country, I would say close to 100,000.
Yeah, so I just wanted to highlight that for those tuning in, because just to sort of speak to, again, the immensity of this need. So as Pastor Rebecca was just saying, and thank you so much for a reminder to think about, again, this population that is a significant part of our community, and to do the work to educate ourselves around this need, to educate ourselves about some of the policies that are being fought for, and again, add our voice to ensuring that, again, there are rights and protections for everyone in this community. So,
Louisa, can you tell me if those numbers I mentioned are close?
I'm sorry, which numbers?
The numbers that I just mentioned, I want to make sure. I don't want it to be accurate.
Yeah, sorry, I don't have that data right on hand. I wish I had prepared that, but I know, like, on average, according to the last census count, which again is about 10 years old, and most recent estimates, it's about 5% of the general population, but that's statewide. But that would be good information to sort of to get more out there. But I would go with Lydia's numbers, and I can check that and get back with you. But I know statewide it's about 450,000. So, and it does fluctuate, right? Because you have some seasonal workers coming through, different stuff like that. But
and I think that just highlights again that even though, again, to your point, Louise, about how, again, a lot of agencies aren't even aware of, how many people are trying to access their services, there are that many more people who aren't accessing those services because they know that they're not accessible. So even if we're not aware that issue is out there, it is. And it's something that we need to really be aware of, and again, do further education.
Yeah, so if you go on lep.gov, there are some good data tools on there, and you can, I think, do it by county level and sort of see what are the most populous languages, different populations in your area, and stuff like that. So again, if there's organizations who want more specific help with that, I feel free to reach out.
And another thing, do you have a quick resource for, like, again, as I know before our call today, talked a little bit about like legal requirements for accessibility. Is there a good place for people to look for that information as a place to start?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely look on our website, right? And it's going to kind of depend on the context, right? So there's different, I think a general rule to keep in mind is if anybody gets any kind of federal money, right? So a doctor that bills Medicaid, a school, a housing authority that gets whatever, they're going to have this, the federal civil rights rules are going to apply to them. And that generally includes language access, right? So I think that's a good rule of thumb, is if this program receives any kind of federal money, they have a language access obligation. But then for more specific things, like some of the stuff about the Social Security number and housing and stuff, on our website, we have different resources. And again, the easiest way to access that is screcursos.com. So that's we did it in Spanish, so it would be easier. And that's going to have specific fact sheets about, your rights in education, your rights to language access in healthcare and stuff like that. So I think that our website is a really good resource. Oh.
Great. Well, again, thank you so much.
Are we there?
Oh, yep, there you are. Yeah, did you freeze a little bit? Yeah. All good. Thank you so much, Louise. All good.
Real opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you, Lydia and Pastor Rebecca. And for everyone, tune in next month for our next topic. So have a great rest of your week, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.